You're not bringing him. My sister said it so casually I almost thought I misheard her. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just kept adjusting the flowers on the reception table, like she was rearranging something insignificant, an ornament, a placeholder, not her own sibling's life. The room was warm, dim with soft gold lights, but her words landed like cold metal in my chest. I stood there, hands loosely clasped, refusing to let them tremble. Is there a reason? I asked quietly. She exhaled. Not annoyed, bored. Mom doesn't approve. Dad thinks it's better if you come alone. It keeps everything simpler. Simpler. The word clung to the air like dust. Behind her, the other bridesmaids slowed their movements, pretending not to listen. Someone dropped a ribbon. No one picked it up. I didn't speak for several seconds. Silence, I've learned, is often more honest than any answer. She turned to face me finally, wearing the kind of smile people use when they're about to say something unforgivable. Look, it's one day. Just, don't make this about you. It was almost impressive, the way she cut the ground out from under me without raising her voice. A clean, elegant slice. She had always been good at that. I felt my pulse steady rather than spike. A strange calm rose in my chest, soft but unmovable. It surprised even me. I'm engaged to him, I said. This isn't a +1 situation. Her expression didn't shift an inch. And we're telling you he's not welcome. There it was. A lifetime of unspoken hierarchy condensed into one perfect sentence. I nodded slowly. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. A quiet recording of the moment I finally understood something I should have seen years ago. She went back to adjusting the flowers, smug in her assumption that I would bend, again, because that's what I'd always done. But this time, something in me didn't move. Not even a little. And they still had no idea what that silence actually meant. I walked out of the hall without another word, letting the door ease shut behind me. The quiet in the corridor felt heavier than the noise inside, like it had been waiting for me. I leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing slowly. Not to calm myself, but to understand myself. There's a difference. My phone buzzed in my hand. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer, not yet. I couldn't bring myself to say, they don't want you there. Not because it would hurt him, he's stronger than they ever bothered to see, but because it would expose a truth I'd been avoiding. I had allowed this pattern for years. The small exclusions. The subtle corrections. The way my family treated my choices like drafting errors they could erase or redraw. I used to think endurance was the same as peace. Now I wasn't so sure. A bridesmaid slipped out of the hall, nearly colliding with me. She startled, then forced a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she murmured. I gave her a polite nod. You didn't. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. For what it's worth, you didn't deserve how she said that. The sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because it was profound, but because it was the first time anyone from that orbit had acknowledged the weight I carried. Thank you, I said. She offered a brief, sympathetic smile before retreating back into the warmth of the celebration, a warmth never meant for me. I stayed there a while longer, listening to the muffled laughter inside. Their laughter. The same kind that had covered years of quiet digs, of choices made on my behalf, of expectations dressed up as love. I checked my reflection in a small decorative mirror on the wall. I looked composed. Entire. But my eyes were finally awake. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. His voice was gentle. Everything okay? For a moment, I couldn't speak. Because nothing was okay. And what I was about to say would become the first crack in everything they thought was unbreakable. I'm still here, I finally said, though my voice felt foreign, like it belonged to someone who had stopped pretending. He noticed immediately. What happened? I stepped toward the far end of the corridor, away from the lingering echo of my sister's laughter. The lights flickered softly against the floor, creating long, thin shadows that stretched between my feet. Funny how even shadows know where they stand. They don't want you at the wedding, I said quietly. Not because of anything you did. Because, they decided they don't approve. The silence on the other end wasn't shocked, it was disappointed. Not in me, but in them. He'd always seen the truth long before I allowed myself to name it. He inhaled. Do you want me to say something? Or, should I come pick you up? I closed my eyes. The offer wrapped around me with more comfort than my own family had ever managed. But comfort wasn't what I needed, not now. No, I whispered. Not yet. I just needed you to know. A pause. Then, with quiet conviction, I'm here. Whatever you decide. His steadiness was a mirror I wasn't used to looking into. In that moment, I saw the version of myself I'd been trying to grow into for years, someone who didn't shrink to fit the space she was given. I slipped my phone into my bag and walked toward the exit of the venue. The night air greeted me with a coolness that felt almost medicinal. A reminder that outside their rules, their whispers, their curated expectations, there was oxygen. There was choice. A car pulled up near the curb, and for a heartbeat, I thought it might be him. Instead, it was my mother stepping out, her expression sharp with purpose, carrying the kind of urgency she reserved only for controlling outcomes that dared to defy her. I heard there was an issue, she said, smoothing her dress as though the fabric itself needed discipline. Let's not create a scene. Her tone wasn't worried. It was corrective. I straightened, surprising us both. Because for the first time I wasn't the one being corrected. And my mother had no idea how close she was to hearing the word she feared most, no. You said. My mother's heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she approached, each step deliberate, each pause calculated. She looked me over the way someone inspects a garment they've worn too often, familiar, expected, taken for granted. What did your sister say to upset you? She asked, though the question carried no curiosity. Only control disguised as concern. I kept my posture still. She told me he's not welcome. A tiny flinch crossed her face, not guilt, just irritation that the message had been delivered without her supervision. She shouldn't have worded it that way, my mother said, adjusting a bracelet that didn't need adjusting. But the decision stands. We want the day to go smoothly. You know how your sister gets. There it was again, the hierarchy, the unspoken declaration that her comfort was the axis our entire family spun around. My mother looked past me toward the venue doors, as if checking to make sure no one important was witnessing this moment. Heaven forbid the illusion crack. Let's be reasonable, she continued. It's one day. You can handle attending alone. You've done it before. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not defiance, alignment. For the first time, my feelings and my boundaries stood in the same place. I'm not attending without him, I said softly. She blinked, stunned by the calm in my tone. My mother had always prepared for storms, never stillness. Stillness unsettles those who rely on power to feel grounded. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. I'm not, I replied. I'm being honest. A passing car washed us in a brief sweep of headlights, illuminating the tightness in her jaw. She stepped closer. You will come, she said, each word clipped. I won't have this family embarrassed because you're feeling sensitive. Sensitive. The word echoed, hollow and familiar. I exhaled slowly. Mom, their approval isn't my permission. Her eyes hardened, recognizing a boundary she didn't place there. For the first time, she didn't know what version of me she was dealing with. And she had no idea the next thing I said would change the balance of our family forever. Mom, I said quietly, I'm not coming to the wedding. The words didn't rise, they didn't tremble. They simply were, solid, placed between us like a stone neither of us could step over. My mother froze. Not dramatically. Not with shock. But with calculation, like she was rearranging the variables in a problem she'd solved 1,000 times before, only to realize one of them had unexpectedly changed. "You're being childish," she whispered, as if lowering her voice made the accusation gentler. "Your sister's wedding is not the place for whatever this is." "This is me choosing not to disappear anymore," I said. She blinked, her lashes fluttering with a kind of disbelief that bordered on insult. "You're overreacting. That's what you always say when you want me quiet." A long, brittle silence stretched between us. The breeze lifted a strand of her neatly styled hair, and she smoothed it back with a trembling hand. It was the first visible crack in her composure. "You know your father won't like this," she warned. "I know," I replied. "And your sister. She made her choice." I met her eyes. "Now I'm making mine." Something in her expression collapsed, not visibly, but internally, the way a structure begins to fail long before it finally falls. She wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later, like a second wave. Right now, she was stunned that her authority didn't land where it always had. That her script, the one she'd used for decades, no longer dictated my lines. "You're being selfish," she hissed softly. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I've just stopped volunteering for roles I never auditioned for." Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't have a retort prepared for that. For once, she had no pre-written ending to offer me. I stepped back. Not dramatically, just enough to create a clean inch of space. Enough to let her know I meant every word. "I won't be there," I repeated, calm as breath. "Not without him." Her jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." Maybe I was. But not the one she thought. Because the real mistake, their mistake, was assuming I would stay silent forever. My mother didn't follow me when I turned away. She just stood there, staring at the space I'd occupied, as if waiting for the old version of me to step back into it. The one who apologized first. The one who swallowed discomfort to keep the peace they never offered in return. But peace built on erasure isn't peace. It's debt. I walked to the edge of the parking lot, the venue lights stretching long shadows across the asphalt. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from my sister. 3 words. "Don't ruin this." No greeting. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just an instruction, delivered with the confidence of someone who had always been obeyed. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on a low stone planter near the entrance, watching small groups of guests arrive, smiling, adjusting outfits, stepping into a celebration I was no longer part of. Or perhaps, never truly was. One couple nodded politely as they passed me, unaware of the quiet fracture unfolding just a few steps away. That's the strange thing about family implosions, they start in silence, disguised as ordinary evenings. A familiar scent drifted past me. My father's cologne. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders set with that stiff posture he used whenever he anticipated confrontation. His tie was slightly askew, he rarely dressed himself for events without my mother's guidance. "I heard you're causing trouble," he said, half tired, half irritated. "I'm not causing anything," I answered. "I'm just not attending under their conditions." He sighed, long, theatrical, the kind designed to imply he was the exhausted victim of unreasonable women. "I don't understand why this has to be an issue," he said. "Can't you just do this one thing for your sister?" "One thing?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, not bitter, just honest. "Dad, it's never just one thing." He frowned, and for the first time, something uncertain flickered across his expression. A recognition, maybe, that this wasn't the usual script. That I wasn't playing the role he expected. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked. It was a simple question. But answering it would unravel more history than he was prepared to face. "It means," I said quietly, "that this isn't the first time I've been asked to shrink so someone else can feel comfortable." My father's brows tightened, as if the words themselves disrupted the air between us. He wasn't used to me naming things plainly. In our family, truth was something you implied gently, or buried politely. Your sister didn't mean anything by it, he said. She just wants the wedding to go smoothly. I watched the familiar pivot, the way he always redirected conflict away from the person who caused it. Their golden child. Their investment. And I'm what? I asked. The complication? He blinked, taken aback by the calmness in my voice. Calm unnerves people when they expect tears. I never said that, he muttered. You didn't have to. He shifted his weight, glancing back at the venue doors as if hoping someone would interrupt us and rescue him from the conversation. But no one came. This moment, the one he avoided for years, held him firmly. You know your sister is under pressure, he said. Planning a wedding is stressful. I almost laughed. Not unkindly, just with the quiet disbelief of someone hearing an excuse they'd memorized too well. Dad, I said softly, this isn't about the wedding. It's about a lifetime of being treated like I'm optional. His face changed, not all at once, but gradually, like a structure absorbing too much weight. That's not true, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. A breeze swept across the lot, rustling a string of unlit lanterns left outside for later. They clinked gently, almost sympathetically. You never asked why I moved out the moment I could, I said. He inhaled sharply but said nothing. You never noticed how many holidays I spent alone because plans were made without me. Or how I stopped sharing anything personal because it always disappeared under someone else's priorities. My father swallowed hard, jaw tightening around a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. You're exaggerating, he said finally, but it sounded like a line he didn't believe anymore. No, I replied. I'm finally telling the truth. A long silence followed, thick, unsettled, irreversible. And he still didn't realize. The truth I was about to reveal next would shake our family's story far more than my decision to walk away. My father looked at me as if he were seeing a language he once knew but hadn't spoken in years, halting, confused, searching for familiar shapes. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The words, whatever they were, refused to cooperate. You should have told us, he said finally, as though the responsibility lived entirely on my side of the line. I did, I answered softly. Just never in ways that interrupted your comfort. He flinched, not because the words were harsh, but because they were true in a way he could no longer dismiss with a sigh. A group of guests walked by, laughing, the kind of light-hearted sound that doesn't belong anywhere near truth-telling. My father's shoulders straightened, as if bracing himself against the possibility that someone might witness us and assume he had done something wrong. Appearance, always appearance. What do you want me to say? He whispered. That we failed you? A surprising ache tightened in my throat. Not because he said it, but because he said it like a confession he hoped would end the conversation, not begin it. I don't need you to confess, I replied. I need you to understand. He rubbed his temples, a gesture I'd grown up interpreting as frustration, though now I realized it was his attempt to signal that the conversation was becoming inconvenient. You're choosing a man over your family, he murmured, as if delivering a moral verdict. No, I said. I'm choosing respect. For both of us. That seemed to throw him. His brows pinched, his mouth tightening into a thin line, caught between pride and the beginnings of shame. You're twisting things, he muttered. I shook my head. I'm clarifying them. The wind picked up again, lifting a few stray petals from the walkway and scattering them across our feet. They looked strangely out of place, delicate, misplaced beauty in the middle of a confrontation decades overdue. My father exhaled heavily, as though surrendering to a reality he didn't want named. Your mother thinks you're being dramatic, he said. Your sister thinks you're jealous. I studied him carefully. And what do you think? He hesitated a full, vulnerable second. I don't know anymore. His uncertainty moved something inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a recognition of the crack forming in the walls they had built. A crack that would grow. Because what came next wasn't anger, it was truth they'd spent years pretending didn't exist. I let his answer sit between us, quiet, unsteady, impossibly honest. My father rarely admitted uncertainty. In our house, doubt was treated like weakness, and weakness like risk. But here he was, stripped of the old script, standing in a silence that didn't protect him anymore. He cleared his throat. "Why now?" he asked. "Why draw a line over this?" I looked past him toward the glowing windows of the venue. Inside, my sister moved through clusters of guests with a confidence she'd learned early. The world bent for her. People softened. Obstacles shifted. And if they didn't, she had a family ready to clear the path. I used to believe love worked that way for all of us. "I've been drawing lines for years," I said. "You just never noticed." He frowned, confused. "Like what?" I could have listed them: birthdays spent at the edges of rooms, conversations where my voice never quite reached the center, decisions made about my life while I was politely expected to nod. But those weren't the moments that shaped this fracture. It was the small, repeated message beneath it all. "You matter, but not as much as she does." Instead, I said, "Dad, every time I've tried to assert myself, you called it overreacting. Every time she crossed a line, you called it stress. Every time Mom dismissed me, you called it her way." He looked down, the tightness in his jaw deepening. "I didn't realize it felt like that." "That's the point," I murmured. "You didn't have to realize. I was the only one paying the cost." A long, uncomfortable pause followed. He shifted again, but this time it wasn't avoidance, it was something closer to unease. The feeling of a truth settling somewhere it couldn't be ignored. "Your sister, she's always needed more from us," he said quietly, as though confessing to himself. "It was easier to give in than to fight her." I nodded. "I know. But making life easier for her made mine smaller." That was the moment he finally looked at me, not as the quiet daughter who blended into the backdrop of family politics, but as someone he had underestimated. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe the truth, maybe another excuse, but he never got the chance. Because behind him, the venue doors swung open. And my mother stepped out, her expression sharp with a new, simmering panic. She had heard just enough to know the balance was shifting, and she wasn't about to let it. My mother's heels struck the concrete with a clipped rhythm as she approached, each step harder than the last. She wasn't composed this time. She wasn't rehearsed. Her calm had cracked. "What exactly is going on here?" she demanded, eyes sweeping between my father and me like she was inspecting a mess someone else ought to clean up. My father straightened instinctively, shoulders locking into place. Old habits. Old hierarchies. Even now, he deferred to her when conflict arrived. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off before he could form a single syllable. "I step away for 10 minutes, she snapped, "and suddenly you're out here stirring up drama?" The accusation wasn't directed at him. It never was. I didn't respond. My silence unsettled her more than any argument could have. She folded her arms tightly, voice dropping into that low, lethal register she reserved for moments when she needed to reassert control. "Enough. You will not ruin this night for your sister." My father's gaze flicked toward me, hesitant, conflicted, almost apologetic. He was beginning to see the weight of the script they had written for me. My mother, however, was still performing hers with flawless commitment. "I'm not ruining anything," I said softly. "I'm choosing not to attend." Her eyes widened in disbelief, the kind that comes from witnessing something outside the laws of her universe. "You don't get to make that choice." I just did. A visible tremor of fury passed through her. She took a step forward, lowering her voice into a whisper sharp enough to slice skin. "If you walk away from this," she hissed, "don't expect things to go back to normal." I held her stare. "Maybe that's the point." For the first time, she faltered. Just a fraction, but enough for me to see something shift behind her eyes. Fear, perhaps. Or recognition. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control of the narrative she'd curated for decades. She turned to my father, grasping his arm. Say something. Fix this. But he didn't move. Not toward her. Not toward me. He stood perfectly still, caught between the truth he'd heard and the illusion she wanted to preserve. And in that fragile silence, something in our family's foundation finally gave way. Because the next word spoken would determine which of them fractured first. For a long, brittle second, no one spoke. My mother's grip on my father's arm tightened, as though pressure alone could force him into alignment. But he didn't look at her. He was staring at me, really staring, like he'd found himself reading a book in a language he should have learned decades ago. Say something, my mother repeated, her voice taut, fraying at the edges. He swallowed. She has a point. The words landed like a glass cracking. Not shattering, just the first sharp fracture of something that would inevitably break. My mother blinked, stunned. You can't possibly be taking her side. I'm not taking sides, he said quietly. I'm listening. Listening. A word I never expected to hear from him, especially not now, when the stakes, her stakes, were so high. My mother's face tightened, color rising beneath her skin. You're both being ridiculous. This is her sister's wedding. She can set rules. That isn't a rule, I replied calmly. It's punishment. My mother turned on me with a force that might have intimidated the person I used to be. Punishment? Don't be dramatic. We're simply protecting the day. By excluding the person I love, I said. By deciding my presence is acceptable only if it comes edited. The wind shifted again, cool and insistent, as though nature itself had tired of our family's old choreography. My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping into a near growl. This isn't about you. It never has been. She didn't realize what she'd admitted until the words escaped into the air, solid, undeniable. My father's eyes widened slightly. Maybe he heard the confession too. I straightened, feeling an unfamiliar steadiness settle in my bones. I know, I said. That's the problem. The silence that followed wasn't like the silences before, those were filled with expectation, pressure, scripts. This one was empty, open, waiting. My mother recoiled as if I'd struck her with a truth she didn't know how to deflect. You're choosing him over us, she whispered. No, I said. I'm choosing myself. Something you never taught me how to do. Her expression flickered, anger, disbelief, something almost like panic. And then the venue doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a parent. It was my sister. And she arrived with the one accusation she believed could shut everything down. My sister stepped out of the venue with the confidence of someone who believed the world would rearrange itself to suit her mood. Her dress shimmered under the entry lights, every detail curated, every strand of hair disciplined into perfection. She didn't look at my mother. She didn't look at my father. Her eyes locked straight onto me. I cannot believe, she said, voice shaking with a rage that masqueraded as hurt, that you're doing this to me. On my weekend. The entitlement in her tone was almost artful, polished by years of reinforcement. Guests inside turned subtly, sensing tension but pretending not to stare. Even shadows seemed to lean closer, waiting. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Which only agitated her more. You're making a scene, she snapped. If you have an issue, handle it privately. This day is not about you. My mother nodded sharply, vindicated by the echo of her own beliefs. My father stayed silent, the ground beneath him shifting too fast to choose a side. I kept my voice soft. You told me he wasn't welcome. Because he isn't, she hissed, stepping closer. I'm not having someone like him ruining my photos. Or my atmosphere. You know how Mom feels about. She caught herself, but far too late. A crack of realization flashed across my father's face. My mother's lips pressed tight, as though physically trying to rewind the word before it finished forming. Someone like him. My heartbeat didn't spike. It steadied. What does that mean exactly? I asked. She folded her arms, doubling down. You're being sensitive. You always take everything the wrong way. No remorse. No pause. Not even a hint of awareness. Just the familiar, polished dismissal. I felt something inside me click into place. Not pain. Not shock. Clarity. You made your choice, I said quietly. Now I'm making mine. My sister scoffed, waving her hand as though pushing aside an inconvenience. Please. You're not actually threatening to skip my wedding. You don't have it in you. My mother nodded, reassured. My father watched me with a stillness that bordered on fear. I breathed in slowly, the night air settling into my lungs with a new kind of certainty. I won't be there, I said. Not under these terms. Not in this family dynamic. Not anymore. For the first time, all three of them looked genuinely stunned, like I had spoken a language they'd never allowed me to know. And in that collective silence, I realized something. This wasn't just a boundary. This was the beginning of my exit. And none of them were prepared for what that meant. Because the fallout from this moment was only just beginning. I left them standing outside the venue, three silhouettes frozen in disbelief, framed by warm lights that suddenly felt harsh against the night. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look back. I simply walked to my car, each step steady, each breath deeper than the last. It wasn't defiance. It was liberation. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was him. I'm outside. Take your time. He wasn't rushing me. He wasn't rescuing me. He was simply there, something my family had never managed without conditions. When I reached his car, he stepped out and opened the door, searching my face. You okay? I nodded, though the truth was more layered. I think I'm finally starting to be. We sat in the car for a moment, the quiet settling around us like a soft blanket. Not emptiness, clarity. I'm done trying to belong to people who only love the version of me they can control, I said. He took my hand. Then let's build something different. Something different. The words struck a chord deep inside me, one I'd muted for years. I looked back at the venue, watching silhouettes move behind the frosted glass. They were scrambling now, my mother's sharp gestures, my sister pacing, my father hovering uselessly between them. For once, their chaos wasn't mine to fix. I've been saving, I said quietly. 4 years. Every paycheck, every side project. I didn't want to depend on them anymore. He squeezed my hand gently. You don't have to explain. You've built your own stability. Stability. Independence. Choice. I finally exhaled. I'm meeting with a lawyer this week. About separating finances, shifting accounts, and making sure none of them can use my name for anything again. He raised a brow. You've thought this through. I've had a lifetime to think, I replied. They just never noticed. One final glance toward the venue, where panic was starting to replace arrogance. Are you ready? He asked. I nodded. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Out of certainty. Because my revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply this. I was removing myself from the story they used to control. And none of them were prepared for a life where I didn't play the role they wrote. What they did next only proved how little they ever understood me. 2 days passed before my phone rang again. Not a call from my sister. Not from my mother. My father. He left a voicemail, his voice thin, threaded with something I'd never heard from him before. Not anger. Not disappointment. Uncertainty. Your mother is upset. Your sister is devastated. We need to talk. But I didn't call back. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply done participating in conversations built on expectation rather than respect. While they spiraled, arguing, assigning blame, rewriting the narrative to make themselves feel steadier, I met with the lawyer. Papers were signed. Permissions revoked. Joint obligations dissolved. Every financial tether they used as leverage, quietly cut. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. When the documents were finalized, I sat in the parking lot afterward, watching the late afternoon light spill across the dashboard. For the first time, the world around me felt wide. Unscripted. Mine. That evening, I received a message from my sister. A single line. "You ruined everything." I stared at the words, the accusation meant to drag me back into the old role. But it didn't land. It didn't even reach me. I typed a reply I never thought I'd be able to write. "No. I just stopped sacrificing myself for your comfort." I hit send. Not to wound her, but to free myself from the weight of silence. Minutes later, another message came through. This one from my mother. A paragraph of polished guilt and subtle blame, ending with, "We expected more loyalty from you." My chest didn't tighten. My pulse didn't rise. Instead, I wrote back. "Loyalty without reciprocity is servitude. I'm done serving." And that was it. No shouting. No spectacle. Just truth delivered with the steadiness of someone who no longer needed their permission to exist. In the days that followed, the family implosion unfolded without me. Accusations, defensiveness, fractures long ignored finally surfacing. For once, the chaos stayed where it belonged, with them. And I moved forward, quietly, deliberately, building a life rooted in peace, not performance. A life where love wasn't conditional. Where my voice wasn't optional. Where I belonged without proving anything. Sometimes revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's simply walking away from those who never learned how to hold you. They called me selfish. They called me dramatic. They called me ungrateful. But when everything finally settled, one truth remained. They called me worthless once. And now they can't afford to forget me.